Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am back with another video. On this video, we are going to be looking at the History Grade 12 Paper 2, okay? Let's take a look at the instructions which you already know at this point. You know that in the exam room, you are allowed to choose, in History Grade 12, you are allowed to choose either two source-based questions and one essay, or two essay questions and one source-based. When you read the instructions, they will tell you exactly that. So now let's say, for example, you are someone who wishes to choose question one as your first source-based and question two as your second source base, and you don't know, you don't understand these questions or these topics quite well. I just want to let you know that I recorded videos. I have two videos explaining internal resistance or civil resistance and explaining the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So please just go and check them out, okay? And then for the essay questions, we're going to cover that in this video as well. However, I have independent videos explaining question 4 and question 5 should you feel like I'm very fast in this video. Moving on to the different types of questions, especially if you're choosing two source-based questions, this is very important for you. So the source-based question comprises of different questions. You have your level 1 questions, which are the easy questions, okay? Those questions require you to go to the source and take information as it is and write it down as your answers. These types of questions require you to extract, to select information from where? From the sources, and that is 15 marks. All of these level 1 questions make up 15 marks. So you cannot afford to lose these 15 marks, guys, because you don't have to think about them. You just go to sources and extract them. Alright? Moving on to level 2 questions. They are also not difficult, they're also not easy, they are just there in the middle. Level 2 questions also make a total of 20 marks. Alright? Then we have our level 3 questions, which are actually difficult and carry a lot of marks. So level 3 questions make a total of 15 marks in the source-based questions. Okay? Moving on to mark allocation, which is equally important. You need to pay attention to mark allocation so that you do not lose marks. When you see 2 times 1 next to a question, it means that you are supposed to provide two responses or two answers in order to score the 2 marks. If you see 1 times 2, it means you're supposed to provide how many responses? 2 responses in order no, sorry. It means that you're supposed to provide only one response, and that one response will give you 2 marks, okay? And then 2 times 2 is equals to 4. For these questions, these are usually a level, this is usually a level 3 question. For these questions to score 4 marks, you are supposed to provide two different responses, okay? I hope that makes sense. In order to do what to get 4 marks. The marker can give you 2 marks for your first response or answer and 2 marks for your second answer, and then you get your 4 marks. Moving on to the level 3 questions, let's focus on the reliability of a source first. So in the exam, they might ask you to comment on the reliability of the source. They might, I'm not saying they're going to, they might ask you. So you should always be in a position to be able to answer this question because it is a level 3 question and it carries a lot of marks. Okay? So for you to be able to answer the question based on the reliability of a source, here are the questions that you are supposed to ask yourself after you are done reading the source. After reading the source, you need to ask yourself what type of a source is it? Is it a primary source or a secondary source? And you know that a primary source is it's first-hand information, okay? Let's say, for example, someone was there when the event was happening, or when the Soweto uprising, for example, was happening. That person was there. They witnessed whatever it is that was happening. So that person becomes what? A primary source because from first-hand experience. That source is what is much more what? Reliable because it is a primary source. The person was there. Hope that makes sense. But you can't come to that conclusion if you don't ask yourself what type of a source is it. You ask yourself who created the source. You check the source if there is the author there, the name of the author, the date, what was the purpose, what does the source tell you, Where was it produced? Do they provide you with that information there at the top? If all of this information is there, then it means the source is what is reliable. But you don't just say the source is reliable and stop there. You need to provide reasons as to why you are saying the source is reliable. And then another thing, a source can be unreliable. It happens that a source is unreliable, okay? And when a source is biased, it is one-sided. That source is unreliable, okay? If that source contains a lot of emotional language, there are no facts, just emotional language, or there is exaggeration, that makes a source to be unreliable. So that is how you answer the reliability question. If you don't ask yourself these questions, you will not be able to answer this question. Okay? Moving on to our next level 3 question, which is commenting on the usefulness of a source. Again, in order for you to be able to evaluate or comment on the usefulness of a source, these questions that you see here, you need to ask them yourself so that you can be able to answer this question. For instance, what is the purpose of the source? What does the source tell you? You see? So you can say the source is useful because it tells me, and then you tell us what the source tells you. Okay? Hope that makes sense. We are going to move on to our next level, three question example. This one, the question reads as follows. Why would a historian regard this source as useful when researching about the apartheid government's reaction to rent boycotts in townships? So this is a previous question paper, history paper 2, November 2024, should you want to use it as well. Alright, so we are supposed to comment on the usefulness of this source. So the first thing that you will have to do is to take a position and say the source is useful. If you are saying the source is useful, and if you feel like the source is not useful, just say that the source is useful to a lesser extent. Don't say a source is useless, okay? Yes, we don't want to end up insulting the examiner. So you can just say the source is useful to a lesser extent. If you are saying the source is useful to a lesser extent. But if it is useful, you just take a position and say the source is useful. And then you provide reasons. Two reasons. Because remember, this is a 2 times 2 equals to 4 question. So if you just provide us with one response that the source is useful and leave it there, you will lose marks. But we need something like this. The source is useful, and then your response number 1, and then your response number 2, and then we are done. I did say that if you ask yourself questions like, what is the purpose of this source? You will be able to determine the usefulness of that specific source. Because, for example, here, the source is useful because it provides us with detailed information. That is the purpose of the source, to provide us with detailed information. And some people, when they get to the exam, they just say it provides us with detailed information. About what? So when you just leave it there, it's incomplete. You need to tell us about what detailed information about what? About violent government reactions against civic organizations, protest actions in townships in the mid-1980s. I hope that makes sense. Moving on to the next slide, another level 3 question, the limitations of a source. Okay, sometimes the source is limited. It has limitations, meaning that the source is good, but it's not that good. It means that the source has limitations. So what makes a source to have limitations? When a source is one-sided, it provides us with only one-sided perspective or viewpoint. When it is biased, when there are facts that are deliberately omitted or exaggerated. Let's say, for example, the source is telling us about the Soweto uprising of 1976, and then they deliberately omit information like the killing of Hector Peterson and the fact that the kids or the youth of 1976 was peacefully protesting. It means that that information has been deliberately omitted. That makes that source to have limitations. This is just an example, by the way. Okay, moving on to propaganda. Propaganda is misinformation. When you spread lies, that is misinformation. So when a source has propaganda, that makes that source to be what? To be limited. I hope it makes sense. Moving on to comparison of sources, which is also a level 3 question, which you cannot afford to lose marks on. Okay, and this one you will always find it all the time. So when you compare your sources, you need to show us that you are indeed comparing. That source 2A says this, and source 2B says this as well. In that case, we are comparing, okay? And it's usually a 2 times 2 is 4 mark question. So please make sure that you provide us with two different comparisons. For example, the question reads as follows. This is question 1, by the way. I used question 1 in this video. Question 1, source based. The question reads as follows. Refer to source 1A and 1B and D. Explain how the information in source 1B supports the evidence in source 1D regarding the protests against black local authorities in the 1980s. 2 times 2 is 4. Here is a good comparison. Source 1B shows township residents protesting. And source 1D, you see, refers to rent vehicles by township residents across the bar. Here's another good example. Source 1B shows protesters marching, an armed, peaceful march, and source 1D. So yeah, yes, good people. Essentially, that is how you compare the sources. Okay. You show us what the other source is saying and what the other source is saying. Okay? But you must make sure that you are answering the question, you're not just comparing a baseless thing. Moving on to the paragraph question, another important question that people usually don't answer in the exam. I don't know why, but people complain with time. But you must try your best to answer this question because these are 3 marks, okay? So the paragraph question is supposed to be one paragraph, okay? Don't break these paragraphs. It's supposed to be one paragraph, all right? And the good thing about the paragraph question is that you don't have to think about the answers or what you will write in your paragraph question. You will just go to the sources, to the relevant sources. If you are doing question 1, you will go to source 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, looking for the relevant information. Okay, as well as your own knowledge, little own knowledge, or even if it's one line, that is okay. Let's look at the question together. Using the information in relevant sources and your own knowledge, write a paragraph of about 8 lines, about 80 words. Another thing, the instruction says 8 lines, 80 words. You don't have to specifically adhere to the 8 lines and 80 words. Because if you do that, you might end up not including or writing other relevant information. Because at the end of the day, you are supposed to have 8 points in this paragraph in order to get your full 8 marks. And when I say 8 points, I'm not saying write this in point form. No, it's still supposed to be written in a paragraph format. But that paragraph should consist of 8 points. For example, this is my first point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You see, this is what I mean by 8 points. I hope that makes sense. So to be able to answer the paragraph question, you need to make sure that you underline the keywords. The keywords in this case is how civic organizations mobilized local communities to resist apartheid government structures in South Africa in the 1980s. Let's take a look at this one. They took responsibility for local communities and addressed issues of self-organization like black yards and street committees. They intensified protests for various basic needs such as housing, bucket toilet system in different townships. They did what? They organized the Tembisa rent boycott. That was the role played by the civic organization. Where do you get this information? I got the information from the relevant sources. It's not my information. That is why at the end of the sentence, I acknowledge, I reference the source that I used. I hope that makes sense. So that is what they mean when they say information from relevant sources. They mean exactly this, from all your 4 sources and your own knowledge. I hope that makes sense, good people. Now we are going to focus on essay questions, okay? The main thing of the video. We are going to be looking at question 4 and question 5. And then if you want to answer question 6, please check my other videos. I did upload a video explaining question 6. Alright, so in this question, we are going to quickly explain the introduction, which I believe you know at this point if you are a returning subscriber, that your introduction is supposed to consist of 3 things. Your step, your line of argument, a reason for your line of argument, and step number 3, orientation. What is your essay going to discuss or explain? Which content are you going to cover in your essay? That is basically what is meant by orientation. So now let's take a look at these three different questions, okay? When the question says to you, explain to what extent, you already know that you say to a greater extent or to a lesser extent, depending on what the question is saying or the statement is saying. When a question says to you, do you agree or disagree? You say you agree or you say you disagree, depending on what the question is saying. When a question says to you, critically discuss, you say you approve or you disapprove. Also, depending on what the question is saying. Another thing that people ask a lot is that, ma'am, can I use your essay? Can I write your essay? Good people, it's not my essay. This essay is addressing the question Elastic big. I hope that makes sense. Meaning that the content that is being used in these videos or in my essay that I write, you can also use it because it is addressing the what the topic of Steve Biko, okay? For example, in this case, they say to explain to what extent Steve Biko and the black consciousness played a significant role. This is an independent question that is different from this one. It says this one, Steve Biko and the philosophy of black consciousness played a major role in reviving activism and organization. They are still asking the same thing, but in different ways. I hope that makes sense. Therefore, the information or the content is going to be the same, meaning that yes, you can use the information or the content from my videos as your essays. However, the way you link, the way you write your introduction and your conclusion should correspond or should go hand in hand with the questions that you will find in the exam. I hope that makes sense. Here's another one, another tricky one that says to us critically discuss how the philosophy of black consciousness influenced Soweto uprising in 1976. Okay, here you will approve that the philosophy of black consciousness influenced Soweto uprising of 1976. Mara, that does not mean that in that essay you will talk about Soweto uprising of 1976 only. No, you will still use the very same information whereby you explain how the philosophy of the black consciousness had an impact on labor, political organizations, community programs, and so forth, because that is the whole content. That is black consciousness. I hope it makes sense. So yes, you can use my video. You can use the essay from my videos and write it as your own. But just change the way you write your introduction, the way you write your conclusion, the way you link. I hope that makes sense. Moving on to our question. You see, this question is different from the questions that we were looking at right now. But the content is still going to be the same. You will realize that the content is still the same. However, the way in which I have written my introduction is different, and the way in which I have linked in this case is also different, but the content is still the same. I hope it makes sense. The question reads as follows: explain to what extent Steve Biko and the black consciousness philosophy inspired black people to empower themselves against apartheid in the 1960s and 1970s. Extend to what extent? Step number one, you take a stance or line of argument. My line of argument here is to a greater extent. Steve Biko and the black consciousness philosophy inspired black people to empower themselves against apartheid in the 1960s and 1970s. Step number two, provide a reason as to why you are saying that. Here is my reason. Because Steve Biko and the black consciousness influenced black people and organizations to take control of their liberation and challenge the systematic oppression of the apartheid regime. Step number three, orientation. What is the essay going to do? Which information am I going, which evidence am I going to draw from? This essay will explain the extent to which Steve Biko and the Black consciousness philosophy inspired Black empowerment during the 1970s and 1960s, focusing on, can you see, this is orientation, on political organization, labor movement, community programs, and the Soweto uprising, because that is what my essay is going to be focusing on. Moving on to our next paragraph, you will realize that in the following slide, there are subheadings like background, like aims of PCM. This is just for you so that you know how you are supposed to structure your essay. Do not write these subheadings. You are not supposed to write this. I have included these so that you know that in each and every paragraph, this is what you're supposed to discuss. In this paragraph, you discuss this. I hope that makes sense. You are not supposed to include this. Alright, so here is our background. You need to have that background. It's supposed to be there. This is marks, okay? So the background reads as follows. The Sharpeville Massacre of 1960 led to the banning of the liberation movements like the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress. The key members of the liberation movements were imprisoned or went to exile. This created a political vacuum or void that opened the way for the establishment of the Black Consciousness Movement. Black consciousness philosophy began in ghetto universities like the University of Zululand, University of Twyfloop, the University of Fort Hare. Steve Biko broke away from the multiracial National Union of South African Students, NUSAS, because he felt like NUSAS was not vocal in its fight against the injustices that were faced by black students. He broke away to form the South African Students Organization, SASO, which aimed to promote black student unity and became a key driver of the Black Consciousness Movement. So now that is the background, how the Black Consciousness emerged. How did it start? I hope that makes sense. And yes, I am very fast in this video because I have an independent video explaining this step by step. So if you feel like I'm too fast, please go back to those videos and watch them, and then you'll be fine. Moving on to the next paragraph, where you talk about the aims of Black Consciousness Movement. The aims reads as follows, or the paragraph reads as follows. The Black Consciousness started as a philosophy that aimed to empower Black people by promoting pride, Black identity, culture, and history. It instilled feelings of self-reliance, self-esteem, and to fight for their own rights. Black consciousness encouraged Black South Africans to overcome the feelings of self-pity, but to achieve mental liberation and emancipation. Because the apartheid regime seemed to have beaten Black people into submission, and the Black consciousness philosophy aimed to revive them and wake them from their long sleep. That is an independent paragraph. We have spoken about the aims of BCM. Moving on to our next paragraph, where you highlight the impact of Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness philosophy on political organization. But you don't write the subtopic there, you just write the paragraph, like I have done so in this case. The early evidence of the impact of Black consciousness on political organizations became evident when Steve Biko and other leaders broke away from NUSAS and formed SASO. SASO focused on students at tertiary institutions. The Black People's Convention served as an umbrella organization for the Black consciousness movement in South Africa, covering groups such as the South African Students Organization SASO and the South African Students Movement SESM, which focused to those at schools. The Viva Frelimo rallies were a series of protests and demonstrations organized by the BCM and SASO in 1974. Link, let's go back to the question. This is how Steve Biko and the Black consciousness philosophy inspired Black people to empower themselves against apartheid in the 1960s and 1970s through political organization. Can you see me linking and referring back to the question? Okay, the question that I got, that I'm answering in this specific video. Even you in the exam, when you link, you will refer back to that specific question that you get in the exam. You will not link according to this question because I am also answering this question, but the content is still the same. I hope it makes sense now. Alright? Moving on to our next paragraph, where we are going to talk about the impact of Steve Biko and the BCM on labor. Okay, so the Black consciousness had an influence on labor as it played a role in mobilizing workers, in bringing workers together. Okay, so through SASO, Black consciousness's influence extended on the labor sector. Okay, resulting in famous strike by the factory workers in Durban. This event led to the formation of Black Allied Workers Union, BAU, and marked a turning point in South African trade unionism, sparking a wave of similar protests across the country. The BAU was among the labor formations that were formed through the influence of Black consciousness. Okay, now let's link. This explains how the ideas, or this shows how the ideas of Steve Biko and the Black consciousness philosophy helped to inspire Black empowerment and resistance in the 1960s and 1970s through labor movement. Moving on to our next paragraph, where we highlight the impact of Steve Biko and the BCM on community programs. All right. So the Steve Biko, no, sorry, it was not supposed to be the Steve Biko there. Okay. Steve Biko and BCM played an important role in mobilizing through community programs. That is the point that you are making. Okay? Since Steve Biko was banished to King William's Town, he diverted what? His focus on black community programs. You are explaining now, okay? Now let's go to our next E, where you provide examples or evidence, resulting to the establishment of various projects like the Zamempilo, Solempilo, Itusen community centers, as well as the Zimele Trust Fund and the Winter School project. Okay, we have provided examples or evidence in this case according to the PIN method. These projects were established to entrench the belief that black people can achieve self-sufficiency. Let's link now. Let's go back to the question. Okay, in this way, it is clear that Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness Movement played an important role in awakening a sense of pride and self-determination among black South Africans under apartheid through community programs. All right. Moving on to our next paragraph, where we speak of the impact of Steve Biko and the BCM on Soweto uprising. Okay. So in this paragraph, you will realize that Steve Biko and Soweto uprising did not happen because of Steve Biko only. You will realize that what Steve Biko did was to influence. So you can't say Soweto uprising started or it happened because of Steve Biko, but because of his influence. I hope that makes sense. Meaning that the students in Soweto were already not happy with whatever that they were dealing with. So Steve Biko influenced them. I hope it makes sense. So our paragraph reads as follows. It is interesting to note that the BCM through SASO and SESM, we've been explaining these abbreviations before, so I'm sure you already know what each one stands for at this point. So BCM through SASO and SESM inspired Soweto school students to form Soweto Student Representative Council, the SSRC. The effort to enforce Bantu education, the effort to enforce Afrikaans as a medium of instruction under Bantu education came to school students who had been influenced by Steve Biko's teachings. You see, they were influenced, thus making students to challenge this oppressive education. Africans laid a fertile ground for the social uprising of 16 June 1976. Students protested against the inferior education and the use of Afrikaans. Many students were injured, arrested, and killed. Among them was Hector Peterson. Okay, this event, let's link. This event led to a national uprising. This is how Steve Biko and the BCM, or the BC philosophy, inspired black people to empower themselves against apartheid in the 1960s and 1970s through the social uprising of 1976. I hope that makes sense. Moving on to our next paragraph. So when you are here, it means that we are about to conclude. Okay? Steve Biko was rearrested in 1977 and he later died in police custody due to police brutality. The ideas that Steve Biko had survived, survived his death, and this was true to his statement that it is better to die for an idea that will live than to live for an idea that will die. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that is how the story of these people ended, or that is how he ended. He was rearrested and then he died because of police brutality. But his ideas lived on, okay? Moving on to our conclusion. When you conclude, you are supposed to say in conclusion, it's supposed to be there. In conclusion, and the conclusion is very, very important, good people. If you fail to conclude your essays, you are losing marks. I don't want to lie. You are basically losing marks. Because when people mark those with essays, the rubric that is being used, it wants you to have a conclusion. Okay? So if for example, because a lot of things happen in the exam room, a lot of things happen there. If you feel like you are running out of time and you see that there's 5 minutes left, conclude that essay than to just leave it hanging there. Mm-mm. Conclusion is important, okay? So in conclusion, to a greater extent, you need to take the line of argument that you took in the introduction again. Steve Biko and the Black consciousness philosophy played a vital role in preparing Black South Africans to resist apartheid and reclaim their sense of pride and identity through political organizations, labor movements, and community programs. Many people began to realize their own power and ability to bring about change. The Soweto uprising further proved the strength of this movement and its lasting impact on the fight for freedom. Therefore, this essay has explained the extent to which Steve Biko and the Black consciousness philosophy inspired Black people to empower themselves against apartheid. I repeat, if you feel like I was very, very fast in this video, please check out my other videos. I have explained this essay again, and I was very slow at that time. But because I'm trying to incorporate or include a lot of things in one video, I'm going to try and be fast. We're now going to move on to our question 5, which is also our essay question. I believe that at this point you know how to write a proper introduction, taking the 3 steps into consideration. Okay, I want us to take a look at this essay question statement. For example, I want to say that make sure that you read the essay question with understanding. Read it 5 times if you have to ensure that you understand before you take a line of argument. For example, this one reads as follows. The handling of Chris Haney's murder in 1993 was the only example of good leadership from party leaders during the negotiation process from 1990 that led to a new political dispensation in South Africa in 1994. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? This one is tricky. How can you agree? You have to disagree because there were so many challenges that the National Party and the ANC faced, including the one of Chris Hani. But there were other various challenges as well, whereby they were able to come with what? With solutions and resolve those challenges or get out of those challenges. So you can't say Chris Hani, the way they handled Chris Hani's murder was the only good example. Also, the way they handled the Sebokeng massacre was that not a good example of good leadership. You see, the way in which they handled a power dispute by using the sunset clause, was that also not a good example of leadership? You see, so you must make sure that you understand what the question is saying to you. You already know this, you already know this. So I am going to move. Yes, our statement reads as follows. Although the negotiation process was plagued with violence, meaning that there was a lot of violence during these negotiations, various political parties were willing to compromise to lay a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. Do you agree with this statement? Use relevant historical evidence to support your line of argument. Okay, I said one may agree. You can say I agree. You can say one may agree. You can say this essay agrees. It's okay as long as there is a line of argument. So, one may agree that although the negotiation process in South Africa was plagued with violence, various political parties were still willing to compromise in order to lay a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. Step number 2, provide a reason. Because despite the numerous challenges, despite all those challenges they faced, including the violent clashes between political groups and repeated breakdowns in talks, both the African National Congress (ANC) and the National Party continued to engage in negotiations until they reached an agreement that marked the beginning of a new democratic era. Okay? This essay, orientation, step number 3, what the essay is going to do. This essay will discuss the important role played by the major political parties, such as the ANC and NP and other parties, and their leaders in the negotiation process, as well as examine or explain how ongoing violence, such as the Sebokeng Muipatong Bishop and the Shell House massacre, along with the Battle of Bophuthatswana, failed to stop the country's progress towards democracy. That is how you write a good introduction, good people. Alright? And the GNU coming of democracy essay is very long, I agree. But it has a lot of information. So even if you get to the exam and you end up forgetting some of the information, chances are you are already going to cover a lot of information. Okay? But I don't want to you will do what you think is best for you in that exam room, okay? That was just my hunch. But do what you think is best for you. Moving on to our background. Background information also important. It's very long, but yeah, let's go. In 1989, the apartheid government was experiencing increasing pressure from internal mass resistance, meaning that people in South Africa were resisting like nobody's business, as well as pressure caused by international isolation and sanctions, meaning that other international countries were isolating themselves from South Africa because they were against the regime that they were practicing at that point in time. As a result, even members of the National Party itself could see the need for a change of policy. Okay? President P.W. Botha stepped down and he was replaced by President F.W. de Klerk, who realized that there was an urgent need for a different approach. During the 1980s, the resistance in South Africa continued. It was clear that even though the ANC remained banned in South Africa, some white people had begun, although the ANC remained banned in South Africa, it had a crucial role to play in determining South Africa's future. As a result, some white people began to fly to Lusaka in Zambia to meet Oliver Tambo and other ANC leaders, resulting to the beginning of secret negotiations with the ANC in exile. That was the beginning of these negotiations or the talks of talks. In 1982, the government moved Mandela, who had been sentenced to life imprisonment, from Robben Island to a prison on the mainland, Victor Vesta prison at Paarl. And from 1985, members of the government, P.W. Botha and F.W. de Klerk, held secret talks with Mandela. Moving on to our paragraph, where you are supposed to talk about F.W. de Klerk's speech. You are supposed to talk about this. If you talk about de Klerk's speech, you will get marks, guys. You may maybe omit some of the information here. It's okay. You may maybe omit it, but as long as you highlight what is written in bold, you will get those marks. Okay, so on the 2nd of February 1990, President F.W. de Klerk addressed Parliament and announced his decision to unban political organizations such as the African National Congress, Pan Africanist Congress, and South African Communist Party. He also declared that political exiles would be allowed to return and that political prisoners, including Nelson Mandela, would be released. This announcement shocked many white members of parliament who did not expect such drastic reforms. On the 11th of February in 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from Victor Verster prison in Cape Town after 27 years of imprisonment, along with 50 other political activists from Robben Island. By 1991, a total of 933 political prisoners had been released. Although the process took time, these actions by F.W. de Klerk clearly demonstrated his willingness to compromise and his commitment to laying a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. Can you see me linking? Referring back to the question, you're supposed to do that as well. Moving on to our next paragraph, where you're supposed to talk about the Sebokeng massacre, you need to highlight what happened at the Sebokeng. So the first round of negotiations between the government and the African National Congress, meaning between the National Party and African National Congress, planned to take place on April 1990, was called off by the ANC after several residents of Sebokeng Township were killed in clashes with the police. This tragic incident, known as the Sebokeng massacre, demonstrated the severe violence that threatened the negotiation process. However, the government was forced to compromise to ensure that talks continue. A judicial commission led by Judge Goldstone was appointed to investigate the killings, and temporary indemnity was granted to ANC exiles, who were to take part in the negotiations. This meant that they could participate in discussions even if there were criminal charges against them. This event, Yalinkin, clearly shows that although the negotiation process was plagued by violence, both the government and the ANC were willing to make compromises to lay a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. Hence, I'm saying that GNUSA is very long, but it's the easiest because all you have to do is to show the role played by the ANC and the role played by the National Party government in trying what? In trying to compromise in order to bring in what? A democratic South Africa in the country. I hope that makes sense. Moving on to our next paragraph, where you have to talk about the Group's 2 minutes of May 1990. You may not write everything as I've written it here, but as long as you know what happened at the Group's 2 and when did it happen, you are good to go. You can have your own paragraph, alright? So in May 1990, the two sides, the ANC and the National Party, met at Groepschuur, which was the president's residence in Cape Town, and discussed the obstacles to negotiations and ways of overcoming these obstacles. They talked about, in the Groepschuur meeting, this is what they spoke about: the troops in the townships, the state of emergency, the ongoing violence, political prisoners, the armed struggle, economic sanctions, the return of exiles, including Oliver Tambo, who was in Lusaka. At the end of the three-day meeting at Groepschuur, both sides agreed on most issues, and they were committed to continue this talk, for these talks to continue happening. So this meeting clearly, their linking, demonstrates that despite the tensions and mistrust between various political parties, they were still willing to compromise in order to lay a foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. We are done with your paragraph of Fruits 2. We move on to our next paragraph where you talk about the Pretoria Minutes of August 1990. So the two sides, which two sides? The ANC and the National Party met again in Pretoria in August 1990. At this meeting, the ANC agreed to suspend the armed struggle, and in return, the National Party government lifted or agreed to lift the state of emergency. There were still differences between the ANC and the NP government. This was about the process of drawing up a new constitution. The ANC wanted majority rule under the new democratic constitution. The National Party government wanted some form of power sharing to protect white economic power. They were concerned that the rights of minorities may not be protected if the ANC gets the majority rule. So, although these disagreements reflected ongoing disputes is when people don't see eye to eye over power dynamics. Both sides continue to compromise and engage in dialogue. Continue having these negotiations or these talks. Their willingness to compromise contributed to the achievement of a democratic South Africa in 1994. You are done. Moving on to your next paragraph, where you talk about Codesa 1 that happened in December 1990. In December 1991, nearly 2 years after the unveiling of the ANC and the release of Nelson Mandela, formal talks between the government and various liberation movements officially began. This meeting was known as the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, which took place at the World Trade Center in Kempton Park, where nearly 300 delegates from 19 different political groups were represented. However, some organizations such as the Conservative Party, the PAC, and AZAPO boycotted the talks in an attempt to undermine the negotiation process. Despite this, CODESA reached a significant compromise regarding the drafting of a new constitution through a two-stage process. The multi-party conference would first draw up an interim constitution, and the first democratically elected parliament would later use it as the basis for the final constitution. Most of the participants also signed a declaration of intent, committing themselves to the establishment of a multi-party democracy. Working groups were then elected to continue discussions on constitutional principles. The formation of an interim government and the timeline for the political transition was made during these meetings or during CODESA. Although the Inkatha Freedom Party IFP refused to sign the declaration after its proposal to include King Goodwill Zwelithini was rejected, the willingness of key parties such as the ANC and National Party to continue working together despite disputes illustrates the determination to reach compromise and lay the groundwork for the democratic South Africa in 1994. I repeat, guys, I am very fast in the interest of time, but I do have a single video focusing on what's this? The GNU, Government of National Unity SA only, without all the other additional things. So if you feel like I'm too fast on this one, please go and check that one out. Moving on to our next paragraph, where we talk about the white only referendum, which happened in March 1992. The Conservative Party for White Voters had been critical right from the beginning of the changes introduced by de Klerk. Many were opposing the removal of apartheid laws during 1991. The opening of CODESA talks in December confirmed the views that the National Party was about to sell out white interests. In 1992, Conservative Party captured a seat normally held by the National Party. De Klerk decided to act and call a referendum for white voters. Many whites were influenced by the positive changes that sanctions were lifted, for example. De Klerk was given a green light to continue with the negotiations. In this case, it is clear that despite internal divisions and oppositions, the MP under de Klerk was willing to take political risks and push for a reform in order to achieve a democratic South Africa. Moving on to our next paragraph, where we talk about CODESA 2, okay? 1992. In May 1992, after another multi-party negotiations, CODESA 2 was held at World Trade Center. During this time, the dispute was over majority vote to take decisions. The National Party wanted decisions to be taken by 75% majority, whereas ANC wanted 70% majority vote. The only agreement that was reached is that the SABC will be unbiased when broadcasting news. Once again, the multi-party negotiations CODESA failed to find breakthrough to a democratically elected government. Although CODESA too failed to produce a final breakthrough towards establishing a democratically elected government, the continued participation of various political parties reflected their determination to find common ground and their willingness to compromise to lay a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. Moving on to our next paragraph, where you highlight the ongoing violence such as the Bishop and the Boipatong massacre to show that despite of this ongoing violence, that did not stop the both parties from reaching a compromise and bringing about the very same democracy that we live in, that we still enjoy even today in 2025. Okay, so while negotiations were busy continuing, on June 1992, violence broke out between ANC and IFP supporters in Boipatong Township. This led to the killing of 49 people, most which were ANC members who were attending a funeral. They were killed by Inkatha supporters helped by the police. Some argued that the government was stirring up conflict through its use of a third force in support of Inkatha in order to deliberately derail the negotiations. Others argued that the conflict resulted from Inkatha being excluded from a major role in negotiations which were dominated by the ANC. The ANC broke off from CODESA and negotiations collapsed. The ANC, SACP and COSATU launched a campaign of rolling mass action that consisted of a general strike by millions of workers followed by mass demonstrations around the country. Another massacre took place in Bisho when soldiers fired on protesters, killing a number of people, unarmed and injuring 200 more. These violent incidents that clearly demonstrate how the negotiation process was plagued by conflict, yet both the ANC and the National Party ultimately remained willing to return to the table and continued working towards a democratic South Africa in 1994. Moving on to our next paragraph, where we talk about the record of understanding of 26 September 1992. On 26 September 1992, Cyril Ramaphosa, representing the ANC, and Ralph Meyer, representing the National Party, held a secret meeting. where they signed an agreement known as the Record of Understanding. In this agreement, both parties committed to taking steps to reduce violence and resume the negotiations. They agreed that Zulu hostels will be fenced to help prevent further conflict and that the carrying and displaying of traditional weapons such as the spears, axes, and knobkerries by Inkatha members would be banned. The government also promised to release more political prisoners. Furthermore, the failed negotiation body CODESA was replaced with another one called the Multi-Party Negotiating Forum. During this period, Joe Slovo, leader of the South African Communist Party, introduced the Sunset Clause, which proposed the creation of a government of national unity after the elections. According to this clause, all parties that received 5% or more of the vote would be included in GNU, in the Government of National Unity. The Sunset Clause was designed to reassure white South Africans and the National Party that they would still have a role in a new democratic government. This agreement demonstrated that despite ongoing tensions and disputes, both sides were willing to compromise and continue negotiations. Alright, moving on to our next paragraph where you talk about the assassination of Chris Hani, 10 April 1993. On 1 April, multi-party talks resumed at World Trade Center. While the negotiations were in progress, Chris Hani was assassinated by a Polishman, Janus Walus, who was hired by a Conservative Party leader, Clive Lewis, on 10 April 1993. This incident almost took South Africa into a terrible civil war between whites and blacks. Nonetheless, Nelson Mandela was able to contain black anger through his speech on television. The culprits were arrested and taken to jail. This angered by the arrest, the AWB and the Afrikaner Vox Front stormed World Trade Center on 25 June 1993 and destroyed the equipment that were used during the negotiations. However, Mandela and de Klerk were able to manage the situation and negotiations continued. You see, despite them going violent, we are still going back to the question, okay? Moving on to our next paragraph, where you talk about the Battle of Bophuthatswana, which happened on February 1994. By the end of February 1994, violence erupted in Bophuthatswana when civil servants went on strike demanding their pension funds to be paid. The AWB, yes guys, AWB, when you get to the exam, you don't have to write this Afrikaans word. No, you can just write AWB and then you'll get your marks, okay? The AWB decided to intervene in support of Prime Minister Lucas Mangobe, who opposed the upcoming democratic elections. Upon their arrival, AWB members began shooting at black civilians, causing chaos and outrage. In retaliation, Bophuthatswana soldiers opened fire and killed several AWB members. This incident demonstrated how the negotiation process was repeatedly plagued by violence and instability. However, these challenges did not stop political leaders from political parties like this. Yes, you refer back to the question. Moving on to our next paragraph, the Shell House massacre, which is also another example of ongoing violence that was there during these negotiations that did not stop both parties from reaching a compromise or reaching an agreement and giving us bringing about democracy. So on 28 March 1994, violence broke out when IFP supporters marched to Shell House and the ANC, sorry, oh, violence broke out when IFP supporters marched to Heschel House, the ANC headquarters in Johannesburg. Around 20,000 to 30,000 IFP supporters, many of them armed with traditional weapons, took part in the march, which led to the violent clashes between ANC and IFP. Shots were fired, resulting in several deaths and injuries in an effort to restore peace. FW declared Nelson Mandela and Mangosuthu Buthelezi held a peace summit, but it failed after Buthelezi's demand to postpone the election date was rejected. This incident highlighted that, despite ongoing violence, political tensions, South Africa's leaders and political parties remained committed in reaching a compromise and establishing a democratic South Africa in 1994. Moving to our last but not least paragraph, whereby we talk about democratic elections that happened 27 April 1994. So on the 27th of April 1994, the first democratic elections were held in South Africa. These elections were administered by the Independent Electoral Commission (IEC), led by Justice Kriegler. 19 political parties, including IFP, took part and the ANC emerged victorious, meaning that the ANC won. Nelson Mandela was crowned the first democratically elected president. Thabo Mbeki and de Klerk became two deputy presidents of South Africa. Therefore, the government of national unity was established to govern South Africa for the first 5 years. Despite the disputes, the tension, and ongoing violence that marked the negotiation process, both the ANC and the National Party remained committed to dialogue and compromise, successfully leading South Africa into a new democratic era. Moving on to our next paragraph, which is the conclusion. Yes, I'm sure you already know how you're supposed to conclude at this point, right? The first thing in conclusion is supposed to be there to show the marker that you are now concluding. I agree. The very same line of argument that you took in the introduction, you still write it down, okay? You tell us what you agree to. I agree that although the negotiation process was plagued with violence, various political parties were willing to compromise to lay a firm foundation for a democratic South Africa in 1994. These negotiations were lengthy. That is your reason. They were lengthy and filled with tension among different political parties and groups, often leading to violence and bloodshed. However, this did not stop the key role players, particularly the ANC and the National Party, from continuing with their talks and working towards achieving democracy. This essay has discussed the different roles played by the ANC, the National Party, and other political parties and leaders, and has provided evidence of how the negotiation process was marked by violence through examples such as the Sebokeng massacre, the Bisho massacre, the Boipatong massacre, the Battle of Bophuthatswana, and the Shell House massacre. Despite these challenges, the determination and willingness of parties involved ultimately led to the birth of a democratic South Africa in 1994. And then you are done writing your GNU essay. You get your 46 out of 50. Okay? But you score your good marks. Alright? I hope that makes sense, good people. If you want to choose GNU, you can choose it. But let's say, for example, the whole year you were not choosing GNU and you want to choose GNU in the exam, it means that you have to practice it even 10 times, okay? Don't go and start GNU with final. I don't want you to come back and crying after writing, okay? If you want to choose GNU this time, then you need to do what? You need to make sure that you practice like nobody's business. Alright, I wish you all the best with your final exams. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share with your fellow classmates. I'll see you when I see you, okay? Another thing, yes, I repeat, I was fast in this video because I was trying to cover a lot in one video, and this video was a revision video. Okay, if you still don't understand certain things, I repeat, I highly suggest that you go through all my videos that I have uploaded. You will find what you are looking for. If I was fast explaining the Government of National Unity essay, if you go through my videos, you would find a video where I was just focusing on the Government of National Unity essay. Same with Steve Biko. If you feel like I was very fast explaining the BCM, the Black Consciousness Movement essay, if you go through my other videos, you will realize that they are independent videos where I have explained those topics. I wish you all the best with your final exams. See you on my next video. Bye.